Hello all, this is the Owl. And so that happened. To cut a long and rather embarrassing story short, I somehow boomered the audio for Shokuryou Goldfish Part 2. Don't worry, that'll be out next week. However, as the fantastic Trippy Chris was doing a video on this, and as it's probably the most requested manga right now on this channel that doesn't rhyme with Bligarashi, I thought we'd try something of an experiment via a simultaneous upload on it. Chris will be doing a one-shot, so if you want a shorter, punchier overview that also has great visual flair, no, seriously, this dude does bloody good work, and his editing is, well, let's just say it makes me want to get better at editing. Go and check him out. Now, I was actually going to do a one-shot too, but after reading this sucker, yeah, this absolutely has to be a deep dive. There is just so much to talk about here. However, much as with Gantz and Animal Human, I am going to have to say a general content warning over this entire manga, as it's a lot. It's way worse than the aforementioned two, frankly, wandering into nearly Uziga Waita levels of shock territory at times. We are talking some of the nastiest stuff you will ever likely read. And naturally, while I can't show you or even probably tell you about some of the ickiest stuff in this thing, especially if you plan on going out and reading this nightmare yourself, proceed at your own risk. Okay, let's do this. Yu Kuraishi and Kazu Inabe are one of those rare but fascinating manga teams, working as a writer-artist combo in the same vein as One and Yusuke Murata, who have previously, among other things, given us the testicle-rockingly good zombie survival manga Fort of Apocalypse. However, Starving Anonymous remains likely their best-known project, and for good reason. It also, no seriously, why is it that the last three manga that I've covered on this channel have been some weird Venn diagram of humans as factory-farmed food, anthropomorphic bears, and going howling at the moon insane a third of the way in? We'll get there, don't worry. Now, Kuraishi is an eccentric character, and I actually went on a bit of a journey, trying to find out some stuff about him because his stories are different. In fact, there are quite a few fans who have mused about if he may in fact be a gay man due to a lot of, let's say, undertones to his work, and occasionally overtones. Honestly, a lot like Sui Ishida, and yeah, I see it. However, Mrs. Owl reckons that Kuraishi might actually be a woman. You know what? I am going to go with his, because that's how all the websites seem to do it. His publication history is honestly bonkers, ranging from extremely dark and grisly horror to silly sci-fi romantic comedies, and yeah. If anyone can find me out some more information on this mangaka, please let me know in the comments. Regardless, this brings me to today's video. Starving Anonymous was, from what I can tell, initially published online and simultaneously released in both Japanese and English, meaning that, yes, for a change, I can actually tell you to go and buy and read this immediately if you're in the market for something that is both very different, surprisingly good, and will also make you want to throw up inside your own brain. It also has an art style that I genuinely love. It feels pretty unique and honestly rather throwbacky, somewhere between Hiroya Oku and older Korean manga, with its tall, often willowy-looking male cast. Mrs. Owl actually says that it maybe looks like a yaoi without the, yaoi, at least not until it goes bonkers, which, by the way, is halfway through volume 1, but that's not my bailiwick. It's also gory as hell, incredibly squicky, and infested with boobs and dongs, so yeah, lots of panels that I can't show you or will need to be censored. Despite emphatically mixed reactions, I'm not kidding. This seems to be one of those stories that people either adore or loathe, and I get it. Starving Anonymous became something of a quiet success story and even got a sequel thing in the vein of Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Ray. We will not be touching the latter until we're done with this one, and we will play it by ear from there. Not an easy read, I'll say that much. However, despite its mixed reactions, this does seem to be a manga that people, love it or hate it, really do struggle to forget. And yeah, again, I get it. It's one part Tokyo Ghoul, one part Gantz, one part survival horror, and one part the contents of the dumpster outside of your local abattoir. Welcome to Starving Anonymous. I hope you brought your appetite. Our story opens at, I think this is supposed to be a McDonald's in Japan. And right off the bat, I want you to take note of a few things, because Inabe's art is masterful. No notes. What do I mean? Well, aside from it just being good, with that heavy, high contrast style that I've always loved, he also clearly understands visual storytelling, and this is summed up perfectly in this one panel. Everyone is stuffing their faces in a very off-putting manner, and the use of a subtle fisheye lens effect adds to the feeling of things being just very off and very wrong. See what I mean? We have already established our tone, as well as a lot of our themes, with a visual alone. We meet our protagonist, who we will later learn is named Ie. He's something of a pretty boy and also a big fan of nuggets, which is big beefy chum Kazu. Is that a wink to the artist's name, by the way? Uses his love of the stuff as a chance to freak him out a bit, telling him that McNuggets are actually made from a substance known as pink slime. Horrible, unusable carcass scraps and worse, heavily processed and then bleached. This actually made me smile a bit, as it's a fairly common urban legend in the West too that I ran into as a kid. Well, kind of an urban legend. Let me explain. See, while the pink slime thing is indeed a hoax, with one of the more common images being from Teletubbies of all things, yes, this is a thing that happened, mechanically separated meat, or MSM, is a real thing. Parts of a carcass, such as cartilage, scraps, and smaller bones, are forced through a fine mesh at extremely high pressures, and the resulting slop is used to bulk out lower-end meat products like sausages or lunch meats. In all fairness, it's actually not quite as awful as it sounds. I mean, a lot of this stuff goes into sausages anyway, and its use has been in decline for the past few decades. products due to concerns over safety as well as improved farming and transportation, reducing the need for it. McDonald's nuggets are not made from MSM, however, and I don't think there are many chains or products that use the stuff anymore to any great extent, although I could be wrong. Anyway, we see, oh right, these bloody things. So-called sound trucks that travel around during election season, although sometimes these are just used for general advertising. They're an essential part of Japanese political campaigning, despite being one of the most generally hated things in the world over there, with endless calls to ban the bastards, as technically they are in violation of noise bylaws a lot of the time, but for some reason not in a way that anyone has ever seemed interested in enforcing. They are as annoying as hell, to be honest though. Just loud, repetitive shouting going past your window at the crack of bloody dawn on workdays. Do note the little web news thing talking about mass disappearances though. It's a nice bit of foreshadowing there. Anyways, this chap is part of some environmentalist party talking about climate change, a, no pun intended, hot button issue at the time this was published. And yes, is still today, I know, particularly in regards to the debate around how much the meat industry contributes, and one that was being heatedly discussed in Japan during the time of publication, with opinions split right down the middle. And no, this is not one that I'm going to weigh in on in my dumb little manga videos, but, well, much like Animal Human, this manga has themes, and also, much like Animal Human, they are not always clear, although I will say that things get political in Volume 2. We get some more of this thesis as Ie and Kazu ride the bus, and we learn that Kazu is going to be studying climate science in a genuinely fun bit of dialogue. Essentially, it's not just because his grandparents died of heat stroke, a real and sadly not terribly uncommon thing in the brutally hot and humid Japanese summers, but because of it being a growth industry with a lot of money to be made as the world, to his mind, ends. Ie, however, wants to be an artist. I actually get a very Kaneki and Nagachika vibe from these two. You've got the pretty, creatively minded, but mildly damp protagonist, and the rough and ready best friend, and there's actually a fair bit in this manga that does remind me of Sui Ishida's scuffed masterpiece. Keep an eye out and see if you agree with me. However, suddenly, mid-conversation, Ie realizes that Kazu and everyone on the bus has passed out, which we later learn is some sort of gas attack in what is almost certainly a nod to Battle Royale, as well as being another of those gorgeous fisheye panels. These two really do have some great horror chops. I am already unsettled. Regardless, shortly after, he blacks out too, and wakes up in a veritable heap of the former passengers, piled unceremoniously in some sort of large industrial environment. Yeah, you may have picked up already that this manga does have imagery that will remind you of things that rhyme with concentration blamps, and there are multiple moments in the story that make me wonder if Kuraishi is pulling a Kohei Horikoshi here. Then, in the first of many, many panels that will need to be censored, seriously, there's a lot of nudity in this bloody thing. Just weird tits and willies wagging all over the place. We see a large number of humans being sorted like livestock. Some are marked as defective, others are forced to lie down on slabs and are flash frozen for processing before being, processed via a bandsaw. Now, I am not 100% clear on this next bit, but it appears that the gas is supposed to basically knock you out harmlessly and make you wake disoriented and stupid, Again, I think. Although it doesn't always seem to work. Sometimes it just drives you insane, and rarely it seems to have almost no long-term effects whatsoever. Yes, I'm sure that there is supposed to be some sort of social allegory here, but it eludes me. Ie, however, is informed that he is what's known as a Type 2, but before he can ask any more questions, someone stabs him with a long kammer-like tool and uses it to haul him off the truck in a genuinely painful-looking sequence, before he's kicked through one of those... no idea what those are called. Those belt curtains you find on conveyor belts at slaughterhouses. Do these even have a name? And again, if you can't already tell, there is a lot of allusion towards the meat industry and factory farming in Japan. Don't worry, this will become even more on the nose soon. I won't be going into it in this video. If you want to know more about this issue, I would really go and watch my recent video on Animal Human, which is, weirdly enough, in a similar headspace. Anyways, yeah, as mentioned, Volume 1 is the most coherent part of the story, and remains pretty grounded, at least until half of the way in. We'll get there in a minute. And remains at a simmer of mildly bonkers until the manga goes completely insane in Volume 2, and keeps going from there. There is a reason that people remember this manga, love it or hate it. Trust me, you will see. Ie tumbles down a steep slope and comes to rest at the bottom of the conveyor belts. Looking around, he notices a huge number of massively obese humans taking in some sort of liquid from feeding tubes in the middle of an enormous chamber. As we'll learn later, this is, how to put it, force feeding via coercion and addiction. And the tubes might well be a nod to the practice of massively and quite brutally force-feeding ducks and geese in the manufacture of foie gras, which was, if I recall, gradually becoming a hot topic in the country at the time this was published, as Japan is, or at least was, quite a big importer of the stuff. Oh, and one of the cattle keels over in a heart attack, also pooping himself, which I won't show you. He discovers Kazu, who is already chubbing up, and he tells him that he has to try this vaguely fruity smelling liquid coming out of the tubes. It's amazing. I wouldn't do that, mate. He doesn't seem quite there anymore. But because Ie isn't the sharpest sock in the drawer, he is actually about to take a swig when a powerful arm grabs him from behind, silencing him and telling him that if he drank the liquid even once, it would permanently mess him up. The aggressive, dark-haired young man is stopped from straight up killing Ie by this dude, a tall, good-looking, and slightly feminine man with a pair of glasses, and weirdly enough, I have to wonder if he might be something of an author insert. Oh, and he's quite aggressively gay, which is interesting, as it's not done in the Okama or Butch style you typically see portrayed in manga. Again, I would love to know more about the mangaka here. The glasses guy is named Yamabiki, the mean guy is named Natsune, and they inform Ie that not only is this some sort of farm, but it's also a breeding facility. Oh, we'll get to that a bit later. Ie, in response, begins pounding on the walls asking for help, which, for some reason, prompts Natsune to beat the absolute crap out of him, I guess attempting to knock him out before he causes something to happen. Only, to Natsune's horror, he was too late. A strange, high-pitched whine sounds, and oh, that's not good. The tough guy seems absolutely terrified as he desperately tells Ie not to turn around for any reason. Instead, he is to immediately pretend like he's drinking from a tube and behave like one of the blasted livestock. A metallic door creaks open, and we see, oh damn, a vast and unseemly form, barely visible against the glare, and it's something that is clearly not human. Ie does what Natsume asked and sees, what the hell? Is that the nozzle from Venture Brothers?
Please do not look away from the nozzle.
Nope, that's organic, and it's some sort of horrible antenna that in turn emits smaller wandering tentacles. Wow, is this sequence freaky. The antenna continue wandering around until they find the guy who had a heart attack earlier, and likely assuming that this is the cause of the noise. Oh, holy crap, no. Like a lot of panels in this sodding gore fest of a manga, I cannot show you any of this. Whips him in half in just a shower of blood and viscera before, oh, what is that? No, seriously, this looks like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland if it ate Alice and then started smoking crack instead. Bloody hell, that is a freaky design, and why does it have people teeth? And the eyes. No, just all my no. It actually reminds me of a creature from a... Okay, there was this really obscure FMV-based CD-ROM DOS game from the early or mid-90s. It was essentially a rail shooter that was half these terrible spaceship sequences and half really awesome atmospheric on-foot stuff. And it had just a ton of huge, creepy-looking enemies, including this massive purple caterpillar thing that gave me nightmares as a lad. If you have any clue what this game is, let me know in the comments. Regardless, the spider, skull, caterpillar thing that we will later find out is called a larva happily tucks into said corpse before, again, way too graphic for YouTube, kills and dismembers a large number of human cattle. Seriously, just flinging limbs and organs everywhere. And it then raises, I guess, the choice cuts up on its jagged tendrils in a scene that is almost certainly a nod to another really gruesome panel from Berserk. That said, with its job done and its snacks obtained, said larva slithers off back into the deep gloom of the mysterious facility. Sometime later, several human workers, janitors essentially, head in and start cleaning up how would I even describe this? Remember that opening sequence from Hellraiser where you see hell and it's just bits of people and gore? Yeah, think that. Regardless, Yamabiki distracts them while Natsume beats the tar out of them, and Yamabiki basically threatens to rape one of them, but instead forces one of the tubes down his throat. There's too much for me to unpack here, so let's move on. They disguise themselves as said janitors and prepare to leave, with Ie suddenly realizing that they only thought of themselves. He tells them that he wants to come along and that he'll help however he can, to which they basically respond by telling him to go sit back down and take his spot amongst the livestock. They do not want him along. Oof, cold. These two, if you haven't already realized, are kind of dicks. Well, Yamabiki's a dick, and Natsune's complicated. We'll learn more about him later. Anyway. As the two walk away, fully prepared to leave him to a terrible fate, Ie saves himself via a complete Deus Ex ass pull, telling them that they can go, but without him they will die, as only he knows what lies outside of the chamber. They wonder what the hell he's talking about. Then we get this. No, Ie is not Daredevil. Did you know that show's almost 10 years old now? Man, that's depressing. But as it so happens, ickier has eidetic memory, more commonly known as photographic memory or perfect recall, the ability to perfectly remember almost all details about stuff after seeing it only once. It's a common trope in fiction, but the actual existence of this phenomenon is highly disputed, with some claiming that this is merely good memory highly exaggerated, and the actual evidence for this sort of photographic memory is thin at best, but yeah, who knows. For reference, I am somewhere at the other end of the spectrum and would lose my pants if I didn't wear a belt. Anyways, they reluctantly agree to take him along, I guess as some sort of living automap, but he also insists on bringing Kazu with, despite Natsune's threats to beat the stupid out of him, and Kazu being just a massive burden right now. A big fat dude with the mind of a small child. Loyal, mate just not very bright. They are interrupted by more of the janitors, and Yamabiki rolls a natural 20 on his bluff check, telling them an increasingly elaborate set of lies about the brain-melting fruit juice, or whatever the hell that stuff is, better known as the solution, not agreeing with the other two, and that they'll be taken for disposal. I guess he essentially steamed hams them through. Why did that become a meme again? They prepare to leave, only, okay, lots to unpack here. The janitors, as it so happens, are leading several well-muscled naked men, completely shaved and wearing ball gags, plus blindfolds, harnesses? Is there a name for this getup? Regardless, they are told that these are breeders. And just like that, we're into the first truly appalling sequence that, fair warning, will rot your soul if you try to read this horror show. They head to some sort of prison-y area where dozens of filthy, haggard-looking women in cells shriek and gibber, desperately calling for men to come and put a key in their locks, if you get my meaning. And I probably can't show you much of this bit at all. It's not incredibly graphic, but it's the sort of thing that the YouTube police are not a fan of right now. It turns out that they're pretty young, but have been made hypersexual and hyperfertile by means of extensive drugging, and are then forced into a cycle of sex, becoming pregnant, and giving birth to multiple offspring at a time. It wears them out extremely fast, but there are always more women. The men, on the other hand, are given an analogous drug, and it turns them into, the best I can do is sex bane, but they will literally screw anything available, and will keep on going until they're basically falling apart. Now, this is where I started having my suspicions about what Kuraishi is alluding to with some parts of the story. I can't go into it right now in too much detail, as it would come over as a bit of a reach. Let's just say, comfort woman, put a pin in that for now, and come back to it in volume 2, where there is a specific moment that to me makes this theory really likely. Yamabiki, because, if you haven't guessed, is a bit of a sex weirdo himself. He injects one of the janitors and then shoves him into a cell with the other one, and we get to watch exactly what you would anticipate happening. One chap gets horribly Ned Beatty'd. And yes, we also get to see that Yamabiki is straight up getting off on it. Ugh, charming. Natsune puts a stop to the, let's be honest here, I do have to wonder if Kuraishi has something of a prison fetish going on because dude, and asks the still sane janitor if there is any way to save the women. However, in a weirdly flowery way, he tells Natsune that no, even if they were all freed, there is no way to fix them. They will be like this forever. And this prompts Natsune to punch him and leave him with his now prison mate. Then walking away, probably thinking the lyrics to Bloodhound Gang's I Hope You Die, and yes, all 10 people that know that song get the joke. And fair warning, this next bit is worse. We're about to hit the really sick stuff. As they prepare to leave the reeking cells, they realize that suddenly they can smell something way, way worse. Then they start to hear something and gradually become aware of the buzzing of flies getting closer. A woman begins to approach them, and oh, this can't be good. Ugh. Yup, this is the bit that made me feel sick. It turns out that she's holding something in her arms, something small that's hard to make out, as it's just a solid mass of flies, and if you can't see where this is going, it's her dead, rotting baby. Seriously, Kuraishi, you absolute bastard. Not only are dead kids sort of a soft spot for me thanks to recently becoming a dad, but the way this is drawn and staged, I can practically smell that from here. And in a frankly hard to get through sequence, thinking that Ickier is the father of the child begs him to take it for a while, reminding him how proud and excited they were at the birth. Seriously, dude, this is like Garth Ennis's run on Hellblazer levels of dark. What is it with dead kids in my manga right now? Ah, stop. Natsune pushes Ickier out of the way, walks up to her, and okay, this bit. He tells her that he's proud of her, then gently kisses her foul mouth, and as she begins to break down and sob, gives her the only mercy he can. He breaks her back, killing her instantly. Woof. He then closes her eyes and says a prayer over her, making Ickier wonder just what the hell Natsune is. Yamabiki, on the other hand, muses that he initially believed that they had been abducted by some sort of organ farm, but this is far too elaborate and weirdly senseless for something like that. Not only in terms of the raw depravity on display here, but in terms of them using sophisticated pharmaceuticals to change people into little more than breeding stock, as well as, you know, the giant bug monster with human teeth. Ickier says that whatever this horrible place is does not matter. The focus should be on getting out of here as soon as humanly possible. However, Natsune, in a pretty grim tone of voice, yeah, Kuraishi does that thing where certain tones are represented by inverted colors in speech bubbles. I've always dug it. And says that he is not going anywhere until he presumably destroys this place and avenges the woman. This will actually make sense later, as see, Natsune has a backstory, a really messed up backstory, and his reactions to the breeding section and the woman with the baby will make a lot of sense later on, but we won't get much of that until volume 2, which is, again, where this manga goes off the rails. Oh, and Yamabiki wants to stay, because there's stuff here that turns him on. Nope, not asking any questions, I'm just backing away slowly. Ickier, however, still wants to leave. If not for his sake, then for Kazu's. Presumably, he wants to get him outside and find some help, and sure enough, right on cue, Kazu begins shouting like an excited child, telling them that he's found something cool and that they need to come and see. Oh joy, what fresh hell is this gonna be? You know what? I think that this would be a good chance for us to discuss something that I've been asked about a few times now in videos. It's going to be a bit of a tangent, so for those of you who are not interested in writing or story structure or things of that ilk, feel free to skip to the next numbered chapter. For everyone else, and judging by the writing section on our Discord, this may in fact be a few of you. Okay then. So, Squick. It's a word that I've used a few times in videos, generally in a moderately derogatory manner. When it comes to manga and film on this channel, and this term, frankly, seems to confuse people. Which, yeah, I get. It's a useful shorthand term that I heard somewhere once to describe a specific sort of graphic content that isn't necessarily gore or dark or disturbing stuff, but it's stuff that will still repulse, disgust, or traumatize the average, reasonable person, even if that person is generally a fan of darker or more grisly content. It doesn't have a perfect definition, but to me it describes content like rape, dead pets or kids, excessive torture and abuse, when it's played in a vaguely exploitative manner, often to garner a cheap and easy emotional reaction from audiences. And yes, if you're hearing something in the background, that's my sodding neighbor, who has for some unknown reason bought an old VW Beetle and souped it up. I hope that he rides the same bus as in this manga. Now, of course it doesn't unpack or categorize easily, as when it comes to this sort of thing, what is and is not Squick, and your opinions on Squicky content in general, a lot of this will come down to subjectivity. I know that kids are a soft spot in my own psychology after becoming a new dad and dealing with the, well, psychological shake, rattle and roll that comes with that territory, but I think most people can distinguish between squicky and simply dark content. Let's see if we can't find a few examples. This, for instance, is gory, sleazy, and occasionally twisted. This, on the other hand, even though it's not quite as visibly gruesome, is Squick. This is extremely dark, brutal, and bloody, and probably rides the line in a few places. This is Squick. And this is... okay, some works are complicated. And see, I'm not saying that a good piece of work cannot contain some squicky content, but it needs to be handled the right way. Berserk is a famous example of that, as it does have some really, well, squicky stuff in there, particularly during the Lost Children and Tower of God arcs, but remains so overall excellent that, well, you kind of have to give it a pass, and none of these moments feel inspired to simply shock. They feel organic to the story, you know? On the other hand, Blade of the Immortal, while it has gorgeous art, a really great story, especially Act 2, and is overall an excellent manga, contains enough Squick that I tend to be reluctant to reread it. In general, it's just not usually a good idea as an author. It too often comes over as cheap and distracting and can really turn people off your work instead of engaging them. So yes, those of you working on short stories, novels, or hell, a handful of you are even making manga, which is just so cool. Remember, if you write it and finish it, I will cover it on this channel. It's fine for your content to be dark, disturbing, or even challenging. But if you find yourself putting in the nasty stuff for the sake of putting in the nasty stuff, just to gross out, shock, or try to force an audience to remember it, it's maybe not a good idea. It's far too easy for your Dolores Claiborne to turn into Rose Madder, for your Martyrs to become a Serbian film, or for your otherwise amazing manga to become Dog Ningen, and nobody wants to be Dog Ningen. And yes, if you want to know why I'm calling it that, I'm not saying the actual title on YouTube. Anyways. At Kazu's beckoning, they enter a room in which, okay, there's just a lot going on in here. It looks like more larvae, perhaps a dozen, are hanging in cocoons, while TV screens flash text saying, "Hello, how are you?" in a wide variety of world languages. Yes, observant viewers may notice something else about the cocoons that just makes them all sorts of wrong. Well, more wrong than a giant insect cocoon, but we'll see more of this later on. Ie touches one, and after standing there for a bit, says there's something moving inside, oh dear, before Yamabiki tells them to shut up. There's someone approaching. A half-dozen janitors enter, carrying a durometer, a tool to measure the hardness of a material for some reason, and they begin running tests on the larvae as well as cleaning them, all while being as quiet as possible. Yamabiki notes that they all seem absolutely terrified and are practically sweating bullets. Sure enough, one of them kicks a bucket, yes, and I am going to guess that some number of them are going to be doing the same before too long, as this causes, for some reason, one of the cocoons to begin hatching. The janitors dive for the door, and some make it out, but it's too late for a pair of them, who begin banging frantically on it until one becomes splattered with blood, and holy crap, no! Another panel that I cannot show you much of, as some huge thing literally rips half the skin off one of them in a manner reminiscent of that honestly pretty damn good Silent Hill movie. Seriously, why is that still the best horror game inspired film out there? Anyway, the trio and the remaining janitor are struck dumb by what emerges from the now extremely, shall we say, Ridley Scott-inspired cocoon. And then, at last, we get a look at it. This gloriously disgusting bastard. From behind, the form is enormous and almost arachnid, with a meaty thorax and a pair of enlarged muscular hind legs, with 3 more pairs in front, somewhere between a locust and a spider. Only there's something just also wrong about this thing. As your eyes roam, you may notice that, rather than claws, the limbs end in human-looking hands, and the musculature of said limbs is also definitely mammalian. It peels the remaining skin off the janitor, and we get a brief glimpse of those horrible sideways humanish jaws, and then it turns around. From behind, the creature is ugly. From the front, it is an utter nightmare. And where do I even start to describe this thing? In a nutshell, the best I can do is that it looks like a gigantic version of one of Masaki Nakayama's monsters hate-fucked a praying mantis before catching the G-virus in the middle of Silent Hill. I also get a very Hiroya Oku vibe, especially stuff from the middle and later volumes of Gantz, but it's hard to put a finger on here. There's actually a creature later on that I really do think is Gantz all the way through, maybe even a direct nod, but we'll get there when we get there. Huge, heavy-lidded, almost chameleon-like eyes, a vaguely human-looking nose, and then the worst part, a horrible trunk-like proboscis ending in those awful jaws. This thing, I cannot get over how much I love the design here. And spoiler, this is the first of many awesomely gross creatures we'll be encountering further in. Despite me not being a fan of Squick in general, if I had to pick one thing about this manga that made me a fan, it would have to be the creatures. They are amazing. The remaining janitor desperately tries to get away, with the monster in hot pursuit, and while he does make some distance, it eventually catches up to him before, okay, this is weird. Much like Shibuya Goldfish. Seriously, Venn diagram the last 4 manga I've done, I guess including next week's, and you'll see just a lot of odd overlaps. The monster begins speaking in a human voice, mimicking its victim's frantic pleas. Honestly, I'm not sure what it is with Japanese horror and how common the monster or ghost imitates the speech of its victims trope is, but it's a thing that I see far too often for it not to be some sort of mythological or urban legend reference, but I can't figure out what it might be. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments, please. Regardless, this all gives me a wonderful analog horror vibe. Perhaps because this reminds me a lot of another analog-inspired monster, the Unknown from Dead by Daylight. In our final panel of Volume 1, we see the second janitor lose his skin in another absolutely revolting scene, while the trio stare on in baffled horror. What the hell do they do now? Just feed it Kazu and run? Regardless, that's Starving Anonymous, and by the way, Volume 1 is the boring part. Volume 2 is where we start getting into the really wild shit, start to learn about the facility in which they are trapped, and also where we start seeing some glimpses of exactly what the author is trying to comment on here, and spoiler, next time we'll be getting a bit political. Japanese political. You'll see what I mean. That said, it'll wait until next time. Anyways, before we finish for the day, I just want to say a huge thanks, as always, to our amazing patrons. Seriously, folks, without you, there is no way that we could continue to produce these videos. Cheddar, Crazy, Question Man 6, Hunting for R2D2, Inukie Koji, Calcor, Callie Caris, Opinion Custard, Philip Campbell, Piece of Yeast, Ranger Danger, Rose Montgomery, Wargle, The Empress, Camiolan, Cheshire Quill, Endymion, Aaron Arnolds, Fluffy Burb, Jake, Jake Ramsey, Lance Goebel, Rafferty, Riss, Simone, Squid, and Yorgborg. I also really want to thank our two Owlbard patrons, Jathis and Polite Crow. That is so bananas generous that I really cannot sufficiently express my gratitude. If you want to help us out and ensure that we can keep on making these videos, why not subscribe, leave a super thanks, or best of all, head on over to our Patreon. If you do the latter, you will get all sorts of benefits, including early access to videos, patron-exclusive videos, a special Discord channel, and more. You'll also get access to a thing towards the end of October that should be pretty damn cool. If you're looking for something different, why not hit Mrs. Owl up for some sort of commission? She does everything from game assets to pixel art to actual art, avatars, OCs, banners, emojis, and more. Her rates are also great. Otherwise, take care all, and cheers. This is the Owl, signing off.
Looks like he's finally gone. Hello, folks. This is Mrs. Owl. I want to thank all our existing patrons, subscribers, and Discord spoopies for your support of the channel. If you're new here or would like to support the channel, please check out Mr. Owl's Patreon. Or if you like his avatar or the pixel art intro, you can check out my Ko-fi page or email me with a commission request. For custom emoji and emotes, they start at $10. Pixel art starts at $10 for the small size, $20 for the medium, and $35 for large and up. Book covers start at $25. Pre-made video game asset packs start at $50, and custom asset packs start at $100. Whether you want some custom emojis like the melting spoopy from the Discord server, video game assets and models, a book cover for that novel you finally finished writing, or have a character you want brought to life, you can reach out to me by email at ashedra@tutanota.com. That's ASHEDRA@TUTANOTA.com. Or you can go to find my Ko-fi page using the links in the description. Once again, thanks to all our supporters who like, subscribe, and pop by the Discord server to say hello. Cheers, and now back to your regularly scheduled programming.